appreciate you all coming here as we're talking about engaging millennials in the workplace. This is a topic that is very dear to me, one that I have a lot of interest in for multiple reasons. One being my husband and I have 3 millennial adult children. They are all married to millennials. So just that, having even a better understanding of our adult children and their spouses is important to us. But also recognizing how important it is to create this sort of an engaging environment in the workplace and what a crucial role the culture plays in how engaged. Not only, by the way, we're focusing on millennials today, but really these things we're going to be talking about create engagement across all generations. It's just that millennials have been ones to step up to the plate and say, hey, this is what we want. This is what we're looking for. This is what we need. And they've been articulating it in a way that hopefully we're all going to learn from today. Now, one of the things that I know for certain is that there's a lot of knowledge in the room. I am not the only one here with knowledge and experience. In fact, there's several millennials in the room here today. So I'm sure that you guys will have some things to say and to share. And so I look forward to all of us learning together as we go through today's webinar. So let me introduce you to Skylar. Skylar is going to be somewhat emceeing and directing today. This is his phone number and his email address. So if for some reason you get thrown off, or when we go into breakout rooms, you're not able to get into your room or not able to get back into the main room, you can just give him a call or shoot him an email. So that's his contact information if you want to screenshot it. Skylar, is there anything you want to share or any instructions over Zoom to help people out?
If you need to change your view, if you want to see more people, up in the top right corner, you can use that button and you can go to side by side or side by side gallery, and you can adjust how many people you can see if you want to see more people while they're talking or not. That might help with some of your breakout groups. But other than that, probably the quickest way if you need any help is just to send me a quick chat here on Zoom and I'll be able to help you out with anything you need.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Skylar. Skylar's also going to be helping me monitor the chat button. So if you do have a question, couple of things, feel free to just unmute yourself and hop in. That really doesn't bother me. I know some people that does bother them. I may answer it right away, or I may say, hey, we're going to get to that in just a couple of minutes. But please feel free to do that, or you can type things into the chat. The one thing that we do ask is that if you are not talking, if you do keep yourself on mute, that'll be really helpful to keep the background noise to a minimum. Right, so let's just take a high-level overview look at what we're going to talk about today. So first of all, why study millennials in the workplace? Then we'll take a look at the research question. What is the question that we presented out there in the world? And part of this research question included a definition of a coaching approach to leadership communication. So we'll be sharing that with you. Who are the millennials? And what do millennials want in the workplace and in their leadership? What gets in the way of engaging millennials? Results from, and we'll share with you some of the results from our independent research. So the first part is going to be research that other people and organizations have done, and then results from our own independent research. Now, one of the things that I wanted to share with you, you guys did get a couple of handouts when you registered for this webinar. I'm going to be referencing those, but also I know some people really like the long, extensive bibliography. So if that is something that's of interest to you, because for the sake of time, I'm going to be sharing a lot of stats and a lot of research information, but I'm not going to be articulating where everything came from. So if you want that extensive bibliography, you can just shoot an email to Skylar and he'll send that over to you. And then we'll move into our summary and conclusions from the research that we did and what we found. And hopefully my goal is to move through this quick enough that we have at least 5 minutes at the end just for some open Q&A, or if there isn't any, then we'll wrap up just a little bit early. All right, so Skylar, if you'll start us off with our first poll question. By the end of 2025, millennials will make up what % of the global workforce? So what do you think the answer to that is? So it looks like 50% of you said you think it's 55%. 25% of you said you believe it's 33%, and 25% of you said you believe it is 75%. Well, I'm going to keep you hanging here for just a couple of minutes, and we'll come back where I show you the answer with you here on this next slide. So why study millennials in the workplace? What's so important about this? Well, there are currently 66 million baby boomers in the US workforce and 33 million Gen Xers in the US workforce. By the end of 2020, this year, 1 in 3 employees will be millennials. Now, here we go. Here's the answer to that poll question. By 2025, 75% of the global workforce will be millennials. Well, there gives us a good reason to study millennials and to understand why study millennials in the workplace. Okay, let's go ahead and do one more poll, Skylar. So this next poll says currently Gen Xers make up what percent of the global workforce? So I initially shared with you some US stats of 33 million. What percentage of the global workforce is made up by Gen X? And by the way, Gen X is the generation that is in between the baby boomers and the millennials, just in case you didn't know for sure. So it looks like 45% of you believe that 50% of Gen Xers make up the global workforce. 36% of you believe that 29% make up the global workforce, and 18% of you believe that 33% makes up the global workforce. Well, let's take a look to see what the answer to this is. Gen Xers make up 16% of the global workforce. So each day between 2018 and 2030, 10,000 boomers will turn 65, potentially retiring. With this mass exodus of baby boomers retiring and not enough Gen Xers in the workforce, we are left with a tremendous leadership gap in the workplace. Organizations are experiencing a 7-year high in not having enough individuals ready to move into leadership positions. And the US is experiencing the greatest challenge with a 49% gap compared to globally with a 34% gap. Many millennials are already in leadership positions, or they have shown from research that they are desiring them. In fact, a 2015 study revealed that 73% of millennials were striving for leadership positions by the end of this year, by the end of 2020. Millennials have moved into leadership positions 5 to 10 years earlier than previous generations. And this is really important to this research, to begin to wrap your head around the life experience, the training and development experience that comes during that 5 to 10 years. Yet most have not had the advantage of opportunities to be fully successful as their predecessors have. A 2017 study identified that 69% of millennial workers were lacking in their life skills and business acumen necessary to fulfill leadership positions and especially higher levels of leadership positions. So it's beneficial for organizations and senior leaders to see millennials as a cohort and a force to align with rather than a force to fight against. So what was the research question that we posed? So the question was, are millennials in the workplace more engaged and developed when their direct supervisor practices a coaching approach to communication? Now, the direct supervisor, we didn't indicate which level that was at. So somebody could have been, at an executive level and they still have a direct supervisor. And they could have just been entry level and had a direct supervisor. There was also a few additional questions that our research addressed. One is, why is studying the engagement of millennials important to organizations and to leaders? What are some of the best leadership development approaches to engage and develop millennials? And how do millennials prefer to be engaged, and why is this their preference? So it's important to note, especially when we get to our research, because anytime you hear me in our independent research refer to a leadership style of communication, this is the definition that we ask the participants to leverage around that style of communication from their leaders. So a coaching approach to communication from our definition was a leader who practices open, non-judgmental listening, who asks thought-provoking, open-ended, curious, meaningful, challenging, and supportive questions, and who provides developmental as well as encouraging feedback in a healthy manner and on a regular basis within the context of the work relationship. So it is not beyond me that is not a mouthful and a very huge definition. But hopefully you're able to begin to wrap your head around that, especially as we continue on talking about the research. So what makes millennials different, and who are they? So I'm curious if you could just type into the chat, when you think of millennials from an age group capacity, what do you think? Where do you think the age starts and where do you think it ends? Meaning, who do you think is the oldest? What age would they be? Our youngest rather, and who do you think are the oldest? So just type those bookends in real quick. I want to see what your thoughts are around this. And Skylar, as those pop in, if you could just read a few of them.
All right, we've got from 20 to 35, 25 to 43, another one for 25 to 35.
Great. Thank you. And then some of you giving the full years. Awesome. Okay. Well, we're going to stop it right there. So what I am going to share with you is, depending on where the research is gathered, it really in any of the generational cohorts, there's usually a little bit of a sliding scale on the years that a cohort begins and the year that a cohort ends. So for the sake of our research, we did have to put bookends on it. And so we did use the Pew Research in order to determine that. And so according to Pew Research, millennials are born between 1981 and 1996. So that puts them between the ages of 24 and 39 years old. Now, that is a huge age gap. When you think of the work-life experience difference between a 24-year-old and a 39-year-old, also, when you think of this research being global research, now some of the information that we're sharing is in the United States, some of it is globally. And so people at different ages do have different experiences in different countries as well. And so different, depending on families and what expectations, different maturity levels can come into play, especially in the workplace. So some of the things that came up from what makes millennials different and who are they is that they are independent workers. They value mentoring and learning opportunities. They prefer flatter organizational structures. They prioritize ethics over social responsibility and financial gains. Many, now remember, there are exceptions to every rule. So as we say this, we are talking in general about this generational cohort. Many reported not seeing title as a measure of success. But rather reported that they would rather make $40,000 a year and be happy and fulfilled in their work, as opposed to $100,000 a year and be dissatisfied. Also, they are driven by happiness, how they define happiness, not how another generational cohort defines happiness, and work-life balance. Typically, from the research, they are less loyal in the first 2 years, but we see a tremendous loyalty and commitment increase after 2.5 years. So who are these millennials? A little bit more about them. One, they are the most highly educated cohort in the workplace right now. And I want to pause because I'm going to make several comments on that throughout this webinar today. Really is important for us to wrap our head around this, that we are dealing with a globally diverse, socially aware, and highly educated cohort in the workplace, not to mention that they are just a mass force to be reckoned with. They have deeply held beliefs and values. They're fast learners, digital natives. This is the first generation that has come in that they really haven't ever known anything other than computers and phones. I don't feel like I'm that old, but the truth is I definitely remember not having cell phones and not having computers. So maybe I'm older than I think, but we see the pace of technology has moved so quickly during this generation. They're naturally team players. They're not as trusting as previous generations. And I'm going to address that a little bit deeper here in just a few moments. They do not like stereotypes. Now I'm going to pause because I could recognize you could all say, well, Michelle, isn't this what you're doing is stereotyping? But we are just talking about, based on the research, what millennials have shown, how they have shown up and what they have said that they prefer. They adapt quickly. They're open to change. They're creative. Now, in previous generations, when we've referred to creative, oftentimes we've thought of things like an artist or a musician. But what we have found in this generational cohort is just by nature, even if that's not a career they have chosen, they're more creative. They like that open space to think, they'll hop onto, Pinterest and figure out how to, do it yourself, whatever it is that they want to do. They'll take the guitar lessons. They'll take the painting lessons and the pottery classes way more frequently than previous generations would have done. And they make up for 1 trillion in US spending. So that's a lot of money. All right, let's go ahead, Skylar, with another poll question. Do you personally and professionally think you know, value, and understand the millennial cohort? So it looks like 20% of you said, absolutely, I understand this cohort. 13% of you said not at all. I find them frustrating. Thank you for being honest. I hope that some of the things we covered today help you to have a little bit better understanding of them. 20% of you said, I have not put much energy or thought into it. And 47% of you said a little. So what I hope more than anything is after today's session, you have a much broader understanding of millennials and even a hunger to learn more. All right, so we are going to move into our first breakout session. So this session is going to last for 7 minutes. Skylar is going to put you in groups of 3 or 4. You are going to be in the same breakout groups again the next go around because we just wanted you to stay comfortable with the groups. So in here, I'm going to ask you to have a conversation. What do millennials want in the workplace and from their leadership? So you're going to talk about that. And then I'm going to ask you to talk about what are the best practices for engaging and developing millennials into leadership. So we're not talking about more the hard skills, we're talking about the leadership skills here in this conversation. So in this breakout session, I'm going to ask you to pick a spokesperson. And remember, when you click to go into your breakout, there will be a group number on there. Please note that group number because we'll be calling on you according to your group number. So if you're the spokesperson, of course, you know who you are, but also know your group number when you come back in and we'll have a debrief here together to learn. So great. I can't wait till you guys get back and we're all learning together from what you come up with. So we'll see you in 7 minutes. Millennials are looking for development that is interactive, includes both coaching and mentoring, again, is relational. We're seeing this word again, is action learning and less theory-based. So they want things that are more hands-on, embraces diversity and inclusion, has a true mission that is demonstrated in behaviors of leadership and not just in words. So don't just put the plaque up on the wall, don't just put the words on your website, but how are you living into it? That is ethical, less formal, includes networking. They did note they do like assessments. However, they want the assessments to be completed in a short amount of time. Now, we saw this in our millennial survey. So the survey that we were collecting would take a person 3 to 5 minutes tops. If they just went through and boom, boom, boom on the Likert scale, it would take 3 minutes. If they really took a little more time thoughting and answered the open-ended questions, probably 5 minutes. Over 50% of the millennials who logged on to take our survey bailed and didn't complete it. So this lets us know how important it is that these surveys, this is just one bit of data from us, but we also got this larger bit of data from our research. They want development that includes feedback and is authentic. They're also looking for opportunities for formal coaching. And this coaching is more on demand. So I've been in the coaching world for many years now, and I literally will schedule out with my leaders, 6 months to a year in advance. Now, that doesn't mean that sometimes these calendar dates don't change, but we go ahead and get these things on the calendars. Millennials are more, from what we're seeing in our research, more looking for, hey, I want to talk to my coach. Are you available? Can you talk to me before the end of the day? So this on-demand coaching, positive psychology and reinforcement, measured results, more of a partner than someone to solve their problems, which is what a coach does anyway, and the ability to build relationships. Also, we're seeing a desire for use of technology in coaching and development. So this technology and coaching in development, using it in there is not an area of expertise for me, but it is an area that I have definitely been looking deeper into. So I'm sharing with you a couple of apps. All of these I've downloaded on my phone and played around with, and have also used them in some of my coaching with millennials and non-millennials. So I will say they're really great tools. But some of the tools that you're looking at here, like Mood Meter and Inner Balance, are really good at teaching us how to grow our emotional intelligence, how to put our feelings into words. This one, Boost, over here on the far right, is really cool. You have an avatar who walks you through and talks with you through a difficult conversation of how this person might respond based off what you're saying. So there's just some really cool things in here, calm, centeredness, the Coach Me really helping. So it's an avatar type coach who is asking them questions. So it's all artificial intelligence, but asking them probing questions to help them critically think. Now, what artificial intelligence can't do is some of the same things that humans can do, but at least it can get any of us in the space of critical thinking and engaging. All right, let's move into our next breakout session. So in this session, I'm going to ask you, you'll be in the same groups. Please, again, notice your group numbers. what gets in the way of engaging and developing millennials? What do you think blocks this engagement and development? So please pick a spokesperson. Again, depending on how quickly we go through, will determine how many groups get to report out. But we'll see you guys back in 7 minutes. Welcome back, everybody. So I'm going to stop sharing just so we can all look at each other just a little bit closer here for a few minutes. So I'm curious what you came up with. What do you think gets in the way of engaging millennials in the workplace? So let's hear from, last time we didn't hear from group 2 or 3. So let's hear from group 2 first. Group 2, who is your spokesperson?
It's me.
Yay, hi Ariel.
Hey. So some of the things that we discussed like that tension that is between millennials wanting to achieve goals really fast and not really paying their dues. Like it used to be like, oh, you'll be promoted in like 3 to 5 years, and like this is just how it's done. But millennials are very like, we want to grow and achieve things really fast. And so we kind of talked more about like ways to overcome that, of like having some smaller goals that millennials can like see like where they can improve and like that path to kind of like run on. Because I think there is that like, I don't want to build them up and then they leave, but you do want them to grow, and you want them to see that there is like opportunity within the organization. That was kind of what we focused on.
Awesome. And Ariel, I hear you using the word we. So does that mean you're a millennial?
I am.
Awesome. All right. Thank you for your expertise in you. All right. I appreciate that. And, Ariel in her group said something that I think is really important. One, yes, from this generation wanting to move into and advance quickly. But the other thing is, remember that stat that I showed, millennials are moving into leadership positions 5 to 10 years earlier. So they really are moving into those areas earlier. Yet, how much are we making sure that we're developing them to match that speed of moving in earlier? All right. Anybody else from Ariel's group want to share anything? Great. Thank you, Ariel, for representing. All right. Let's go to, you were group 2 or 3, Ariel? 2? I think, yeah. Okay. Let's go to group 3. Group 3, if you would share with us, who's your spokesperson?
It's me.
Hey, hi, Debbie.
Hi. So we talked about a lot of things. We had a really good conversation, and we talked about some of the things that might get in our way of engaging and developing millennials, not taking the time for connection and really building that relationship, and so that we can build trust with them and let them know that we do want to hear what they have to say, that we are interested in their ideas and their input. We talked about, learning the terminology so we can kind of translate some of the things sometimes that a millennial might say, and being open to maybe the differences in how we speak. And we call it, the lingo, the millennial lingo sometimes, to understand that a little bit better. And we talk a lot about if we're resistant to flexing our style to more of their style. So we kind of called it just going old school all the time. Mm-hmm. And not thinking about what they might like when it comes to communication. That they're such great multitaskers. It seems like they can learn things so quick and just move through things much quicker than we can, and embracing that in them. And again, understanding and flexing how we use technology and being open to learn new technology, and don't throw like an old training manual at them and say, here's how you need to learn. Again, flexing our style in the whole learning realm of the workplace as well. And even the workspace, we talk a little bit about how different workspaces look to appeal more to millennials.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Debbie. Really, really great feedback. Anybody else in Debbie's group want to share what you came up with? All right. Well, we won't have time for a full debrief from the other 2 groups, but group 1 and 4, do you have just like 1 or 2 tidbits that you could share with us real quickly?
I think our feedback was similar, that it's about taking time to learn how to engage and kind of making it a priority.
Yeah, intentional. Definitely intentional is is a really important word here. Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, please, Stephanie, go.
I would just say really quickly, it kind of ties into all of this. The one thing that kind of was the common thread through all of our talking was about misunderstanding. It's not taking the time to understand the perspective of, and these generational differences between millennials and boomers and Gen Xers. Yeah.
Well, and you know what, Stephanie, what that makes me think of is, and this has been around a long time. Just because something's been around a long time doesn't mean it's not still good, but seek to understand before being understood. How many times if we would just put ourselves in the place to say, tell me more, but with genuine curiosity, not with sarcasm, tell me more. I'd like to understand where you're coming from. That doesn't mean we have to agree with the person, but at least understanding is more important in human nature than being right. And so just feeling like at least you understand where I'm coming from. Okay, anybody else have anything burning to share? This is really good stuff. All right, well, thank you for all of that feedback. So let's go ahead and keep moving. Let's share a little bit with you about what we came up with from our research. So one more poll question. Skylar, if you'd launched this last poll for us for the day. From your experience, do the senior leaders you work with know how to best engage and develop their millennial direct reports and colleagues? All right, so it looks like 14% of you said definitely. 14% of you said not at all. 50% said they try, and 21% said they don't really talk about it. And so I would almost put those last three all in the same category, because if you're not doing anything, or if you're trying but it's not successful, or if you're not really talking about it, what sort of a difference are you making? I'm actually glad to see that at 14%, that's actually a fairly high percentage. So we think of what gets in the way of millennials. Here's some of the things that we found in our research, and definitely some of this aligns with the feedback that you guys shared. So one thing is measuring up. Millennials, like previous generations of this age, often do not have themselves completely figured out, and they are looking for reinforcement around, am I good enough? What do I do well? Am I meeting expectations? What are my professional strengths and opportunities for growth? Millennials have a tendency to measure themselves against other peer success. And sometimes this is only what appears to be peer success based on what they're seeing in social media or what they're observing. And it may look like things are much more successful than what they actually are. Also, we found from our research, now other generations suffer with this as well. This isn't just millennials, but we did find this. It may be that this is in larger numbers because this is such a massive cohort. It may be because they're moving into leadership positions much faster. But what we are seeing is that this generation in that measuring up is dealing with some imposter syndrome and some levels of anxiety that are higher levels than what we've seen in some of the other generations. Next, stereotyping. Now, stereotypes can be beneficial when they're used to simplify information. However, when using stereotypes in generations and understanding different people, leaders can create misguided categorizations, resulting in unfounded judgment, storytelling in their minds, prejudices, and biases. Generational stereotypes, also known as ageism, typically break down relationships, whether this is intentional or unintentional. And by the way, it happens at both ends of the spectrum. So for the sake of our time today, we're only going to talk about the impact on the millennials. However, I did a webinar last week for the Center for Creative Leadership on this same topic, and somebody typed in, okay, boomer. And I was like, yes, that is an example of ageism at the opposite end of the spectrum. So generational stereotypes break down relationships. A 2017 study said that roughly 25% of employees make judgments about their coworkers and supervisors' ability to do their job based on age alone. So they've already made up their mind about this person before they've even actually engaged and worked with them. Here is an example. Millennials have been stereotyped as being self-absorbed and narcissistic. Yet a 25-year study of almost 30,000 young adults did not find any evidence of self-centeredness or narcissism increase in this generation, here's the important part, compared to previous generations at this age. You got that? So the difference there. So compared to previous generations at this age. Millennials have also been stereotyped as not being loyal. Yet research shows, given the opportunity, millennials want to be loyal, they want to grow, they want to develop, and they want to move into leadership roles. So although ageism was not a major area around this study, we did learn a lot about it. Most generational stereotypes are around work ethic and values and are unfounded and are inconsistent. So let me give you an example. Most data is collected in a moment in time. So for example, if I'm doing a survey and I say, okay, on a Likert scale of 1 to 5, how important is work to you? And I ask a 55-year-old this question, and I also ask a 25-year-old that question in this moment in time. Well, of course, I'm going to have different responses because priorities are different at different stages of life. A better way to do the research would be to ask this question and then track that 25-year-old or that group of millennials over a long period of time, and then ask them the same question at age 55 and compare it to the answer of the 55-year-old 30 years previous. Unfortunately, most work around generational stereotyping does not follow this sort of a long record. And of course, with millennials, we couldn't even do that yet because the oldest millennial is only 39, haven't even reached that 55-year-old mark. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you, Skylar sent to you guys some handouts. In one of the handouts that I sent out, there was some information in there about how to spot when ageism is happening in the workplace, and also some tips and some things that you can do to overcome. There's also where that research was found. So if you want to take a little bit deeper dive into that, there's some great information there. So the next is culture. So the work culture can definitely get in the way of engaging millennials. So a culture where leaders are promoted just based on tenure, how long they've been in the organization, typically does not work for millennials. Also, we've already talked about this command and control, cowboy, you just do what I say, style of leadership typically doesn't work either. And leaders who are not willing to open their minds, to engage, to develop, to learn how to develop, to invest, and you guys talked a lot about this, to invest in relationship, to seek to understand before being understood, have much less of an opportunity of maintaining the millennials. So, which I don't have a direct correlation here. I have a theory. This is probably one of the reasons why many millennials leave before 2 years is over. And so then they've gotten the label of not being loyal. All right, so again, a lot of information in the handout. Some of this next information that I'm going to go over is also in another handout. Much of the information comes from an International Coaching Federation survey that was done in 2017. So what does work for millennials? Well, in the past, formal coaching was reserved for executive development. However, progressive companies are opening up formal coaching to more and more levels of leadership, including even high potentials. I just got an email last week asking us, and this has happened before, this isn't the first time, but I just got one last week asking us to sit down with them and help them develop a high potential program, which would include coaching. Organizations who are experiencing the highest levels of millennial engagement are those who embrace a coaching culture. So we're going to talk a little bit about what a coaching culture is. So it is organizations who include informal as well as formal coaching from their leaders and mentors. So I'm going to talk in just a minute a little bit deeper about that. So it's not that they just say it in name. Like, yeah, I remember before I got my coaching certification years ago, I definitely would have said, oh, I'm a coaching leader. But it wasn't until I saw real coaching take place that I realized I'm not a coaching leader at all. I had just given myself that label because I cared about my people and I invested in them and I told them what to do, like the coach tells you what to do on the ball field. But that wasn't real, true coaching style of leadership. They're looking for managers who coach them to help them develop and not just managers who coach them because of poor performance. So a coaching culture impacts all areas of work performance, including productivity, improvement of business strategies, communication skills, career opportunities, overall employee well-being, accelerating the onboarding process of new roles at all levels, by the way, increasing self-esteem, confidence, and improving work-life balance. So again, more of this information is detailed out in that handout that I gave to you. We see the best results when leaders embrace a coaching and mentor style of leadership in unison. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this because this was validated in our independent research as well. So this study also revealed that leaders who approach millennials with the attitude of expectations and openness as a coach, rather than the characteristics of a traditional boss, of what we knew as the cowboys, experience higher levels of engagement. Now, here's something that's really important, especially if you have some influence or you have some impact on how these things happen in creating a coaching culture. Although many organizations and their leaders understand and value coaching, or they say they do, few embrace what it takes to create a coaching culture, including investments of their resources of time and money. Organizations that have been successful in creating a coaching culture have embraced and offered a variety of processes for training and developing their leaders and managers to use coaching skills. Those who are truly invested have offered ongoing coaching and development for their leaders in this area after the training is completed. I'm going to share some stats about that in just a moment. These skills are essential competencies for managers, but only 36% of organizations offer coach-specific training to their leaders and managers, despite what the research tells us. So regardless of the coach training approach, successful coaching requires both training and experience. So this is where it's one thing to send your leaders and your managers to a training and development program, and they come back woo woo all excited, and they coach for about 3 days, and then they're right back to where everything was. So this is why it's so important that there's continued support and accountability. So whether you create that internally or you create that by external coaches, it's really important until those new neurological pathways are created, those new ways of being and behaving that override the old ways. And that doesn't mean we run away from everything we've done before. There may be several things that have worked. We are just doing this in addition to. So I think it's also in a different research study, we found that it takes leaders and managers 3 to 6 months to become familiar with using coaching skills in their communication practice in order for them to embrace this and begin to use it. So I'm going to pause there and see any thoughts or questions or surprises around any of this information. All right. So let's keep going. Again, the handout refers to very specifically some of this information that I just shared with you, if that's important to you. So 3 things that I want to take a look at in this little bit of time that we have left from our independent research. One was that we really focused on engagement. So engagement meaning identifying communication and engagement approaches used by a direct supervisor that either increased or decreased engagement in the millennial direct reports in the workplace. So that's really what we're focusing on. Remember that question that we asked and the 3 sub-questions, as well as how we define a coaching approach to leadership. Our survey included 23 quantitative questions on a scale of 1 to 5 and 3 open-ended questions. We had 487 millennial responders who completed. We had more that started, but we had 487 who actually completed the research, and there was representation from 33 different countries. So some of the results from our independent research was, I am more engaged if my direct supervisor practices coaching skills. Remember how we defined a coaching approach to leadership communication. My direct supervisor provides feedback in a detailed and timely manner that I understand and I can do something with. If given the space to come up with my own solutions, I am more engaged with my work. And then we also found some interesting information that we didn't expect between a correlation between loyalty, happiness, and if a millennial will search for another job in the next year. So let me just take a minute and share a little bit of this information with you. So here, when you look at this visual, we see we asked the question, this is one of the ones on the Likert scale, I would be more engaged if my direct supervisor practiced a coaching approach or used coaching skills. So in this visual, you can see that there are higher scores in the agree category across all age groups of millennials, especially in the older millennials born between 1981 and 1984. So this indicates that millennials are more engaged when their direct supervisor practices coaching skills as defined by our survey when they are communicating with them. Now, we thought it was interesting, something that was a direct correlation with this question, which again, we didn't know what was going to be the correlations or not, was in our open-ended questions. So in question number 32, they were asked, please describe something your direct supervisor has done that was very effective for you. So when we asked this question, there were 345 responses to this question. 160 of those were tagged as neutral, meaning that they didn't fall under the umbrella of our definition of coaching. 178 of those were tagged as directly demonstrating coaching skills as defined by this research, or 51.59%. So obviously I'm not going to read all of these to you, but I do want to read just a few of them to you so you can hear how this cohort is literally articulating in such great, even using coaching words, what is working for them. So here's just a couple. She is always willing to listen without judgment. And I'm reading these verbatim, by the way. I am comfortable to get upset and to be vulnerable in front of her. Her willingness to be available for me makes me feel valued. I know she always has my best intentions at heart, and that alone motivates me. So another, this, they didn't say male or female, always asks how I would achieve something instead of just telling me what to do and how to do it. Another, she lets me be creative and come up with my own ideas, which means that she has trust in me. Another, she encourages me to find my own way of solving problems, to be creative and to come up with my own work tasks. My leadership continually gives me feedback. They listen and create space for me to process, then ask clarifying and reflective questions. I am lucky to work for a boss that actively asks and values my opinion, even on things that they are more of the expert in than me, because they value my overall judgment and the ability to work through problems with them. This makes me feel both respected and engaged. So anyway, I could keep going, but I think you get, like I said, I don't even know. I think maybe when I was older in that age group, that cohort, I could have articulated the words, but just the way that they're able to articulate what is working for them, rather than just like, hey, my boss is great, I really like him or her, but they really put it into words. Ironically, at the opposite end, we had 7 of these responses from the 345 that were tagged as completely opposite of coaching skills as defined by this research, which came up as 2.03%. So I wanted to share a little bit of this with you too, because I wanted you to hear the opposite for what some people are experiencing. 1, we barely speak anymore. When something comes up, it's usually delivered as a directive rather than an opportunity to collaborate and to problem solve. He is jealous-hearted and intimidated, so he spends most of his time ignoring me and pretending that I don't have any talents or experience. They give tasks and they don't give any feedback on them. When I was out, they responded to emails in my absence, ran my sales orders for me, micromanaged me, and walked all over the top of me. They give too many orders. They micromanage and they don't share information. They constantly micromanage my daily activities. So just a couple of things that we noted here from this feedback that really cause disengagement. The opposite of engagement is micromanaging is one of the direct opposites of coaching skills used by managers that has negative impact, causes disengagement, and is demoralizing. Not sharing information and not giving feedback, or giving feedback that is too vague. Not communicating or not communicating clearly. Overall, not being supportive, or not asking for input. So ironically, I did want to share with you guys, there was a very interesting outlier, couple of outliers here. So the coaching skills of listening and feedback, which were typically shown to be very, very supportive in our research, and we use that in the definition, can actually have a negative impact if the direct supervisor listens and doesn't do anything with the information, or if the direct supervisor gives feedback that is unclear and the millennial direct report is not sure what that feedback means or what to do with that. So I hope you guys, I know it's easy for our brains to wonder when we're in something virtual like this, but I hope you're really getting this, because this is some good stuff. Another outlier that we got from question 32 was a responder who said, I love that they, being their direct supervisor, trust me and my opinions, but I really wish they would voice their own opinions every once in a while so that they can help me and I don't have to do everything by myself. So with this outlier, it's really interesting to note that it appears this person has a direct supervisor that seems to practice coaching skills, but this responder was also looking for some clarity and direction. So one of the things that we concluded is successful leadership has a balance of coaching skills and clarity and direction. So we also saw this in the previous research that wasn't ours, that millennials are looking for coaches, but they're also looking for mentors. And so it's really important that leaders know their people to know which they need to give. You know, we used to call this situational leadership, and that really is still what we're embracing here. All right, so just a couple more things that I'm going to share with you, not quite as in depth as we did that one, but my direct supervisor provides feedback in a detailed and timely manner that I understand and I can do something with it. So providing clear feedback in a timely manner was definitely one of the coaching skills as defined by our definition of coaching communication. The bars, again, are aligned with the 4 subset groups of the millennial age range. And you're able to see that most responders across all 4 subset groups agreed with the statement as it was presented. So what we can see from this, it appears most of the direct supervisors of our participants of this survey are actually doing a pretty good job with feedback. All right, so looking at this next one, you know, if I am given the space to come up with my own solutions, I am more engaged in work. Now, what I'm showing you here, because we compared age groups, we also compared sizes of the organization. So this one, instead of being compared to age groups, we just showed the horizontal results of being compared to different organization sizes. So allowing millennials the opportunity to create their own solutions is a leadership coaching skill, again, defined by our survey. Generally, all responders from each company size categorized in strongly agree or agree responses. So this lets us know, according to our responders, millennials desire autonomy to problem solve, and when they are given this opportunity, they are more engaged. All right, last but not least, this one is a little bit harder to read, so just bear with me as I, take a look at cross-hatching where we saw happiness, loyalty, and desire for a new job. So this table illustrates the correlation between 3 different questions, question 9, 26, and 31. So question 9 had to do with happiness. How happy are you in your current job? 26 had to do with, I am more engaged due to my leader's coaching style of communication. And question 31 said, I plan to look for another job within the next year. So these results indicated that those who responded that they are happy in question 9 at their current job are more likely to be loyal based on their direct supervisor style of leadership. They are also less likely to look for a new job within the next year based on their leader style of communication and leadership. Participants who said that they were likely to look for a new job in the next year also left lower scores of loyalty to their organization based on their direct supervisor style of leadership. So what we concluded from this is that this evidence illustrates the value to leaders in their organizations when direct supervisors incorporate coaching skill style of communication into their leadership, because it increases loyalty and reduces turnover. All right, so a few things as we just take a look at our summary and conclusions that we came up with from this, and you guys have definitely added to enhance this. There is no better opportunity than now to engage millennials and leverage millennial potential. A coaching approach from leadership and a coaching culture will create higher levels of loyalty, engagement, commitment, and growth to the bottom line. So this isn't just about soft skills. This is definitely about growth to the bottom line. A coaching approach and coaching culture allows millennials to be meaningfully challenged and will potentially, because remember, we're challenging them to come up with their own solutions, and potentially will result in them staying longer in an organization. It is reasonable to assume that millennials will continue to expect regular feedback from their leadership and will continue to see leaders as a partner rather than a person who holds all of the answers. Millennials appreciate the need for technology and want it to be incorporated in coaching and development. It is important, if you really want to make a difference, that you are intentional to budget for leader, manager, coach skill development and formal training of millennials as well as of the leaders. Be intentional to become educated on generational stereotypes, not to use ageism or fall into these categories where we just start, rolling our eyes and saying things about the different generations, because most of this information is based on stereotypes rather than consistent facts anyway. And from our independent research, Direct supervisors of millennials are more successful at engaging their millennial direct reports when they practice both coaching and a directive style of leadership, when and where appropriate. So knowing when to use a different style in different situations. Again, a lot of this is based on the competency of the person, the confidence of the person, and the capacity that the person has to take things on. Millennial direct reports feel disregarded and more frustrated when their direct supervisor listens but does not take action to what they listened to. And millennial direct reports felt frustrated and confused when they received feedback that was not clear and they did not understand it or did not know what to do with it. All right, so a couple things that I'm going to share with you right now. We're up to some Q&A in the last few minutes. I love this, Maslow's for millennials. So when we look at this and we think of what are the basic needs of millennials, so according to this little visual here, basic needs are time for personal pursuits, work life, access to information, and the ability to participate and collaborate. Psychological needs are the opportunity to build relationship, social interaction, open and ongoing communication, positive reinforcement, feedback, and development opportunities. And then at the top of self-actualization, really needing to connect to the bigger picture. I don't want to just be a cog in the wheel. How does what I do connect to the vision of the organization? How does what we do on this team connect to the vision of the organization? And how is what I'm doing contributing to make the world a better place? And then I thought this one, which is a very different approach, is also worth looking at, but the need for structure. What are the rules of the game? Feedback. How do I know I'm on the right track? Purpose. Wait, why am I doing this? What's the purpose? Remember, we're dealing with a very educated group here. Direction. How do I achieve my career and life goals? Care. Is somebody looking out and caring for me? So one of the things I thought about when we finished this research, almost going global in my own mind, is just, man, if we at MSBCoach could really help organizations to create a coaching culture and really help leaders, and I know we can, we've got the programs to do it, but really help leaders and managers to understand coaching skills and begin to embrace them, begin to use them, how much better would workplace culture and environments be? But then I got even bigger picture and got to thinking, well, why would we stop there? Why wouldn't we teach millennials as well how to use these skills and how to practice them and how to embrace them? And just thinking, what would happen if our world would begin to embrace more of this open-minded coaching style? Again, it's not the only style, but it is another tool in the tool belt that we're able to pull out and use if we embrace this coaching style of communication. So with that, we've got about 9 minutes left, which was, I was hoping we'd have 5 to 10 minutes left. Let me pause before we go to questions. If you are interested, we do have programs that we have been running for quite some time on teaching leaders. We call it Leaders Who Coach. If you want to introduce something into your whole organization, we have what's called a conversational oxygen program, where we literally are teaching people these coaching skills so it becomes a part of the culture. And you can see from the stats and the results here, it makes a tremendous difference. But it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to invest in it. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen here and just see, does anybody have any questions or anything that you would like to share at this time, or even any feedback?
I'll share.
Okay, thank you.
Camera's off, but I think I mentioned before, or maybe I mentioned this in my group, I feel like I'm in this sandwich generation. I'm Gen X, and I'm often in a place where I'm trying to help the millennials understand the boomers and the boomers understand the millennials. And some of the statistics that you gave us are really helpful, as like I am right now going through the process of trying to develop a DE&I plan with a millennial to put in front of the boomer. Mm-hmm. And to be able to tell him, here's why this is important. Millennials make up, by 2025, they'll make up 75% of the workforce. I think that's going to be really eye-opening to him, some of those stats in the beginning. So thank you. That helps me advocate for these kinds of things.
Awesome, Stephanie, great. And hopefully some of those handouts that we sent over to you will help as well, that you can refer to some of that research. Yeah, if there's anything we can help you with, let us know.
Yeah, because he's more of that cowboy you know, and he's got 1 year left, so he's on the retirement countdown. And
Mhm.
anyway,
Yeah. And you're in there going, wait, there's so much more we need to do. Yeah.
exactly.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else want to share? Would love to hear from you. What did you think of this? What are you working on? What impacted you?
I have a question if I can ask you. You made several references to the highly educated generation
Mhm.
relative to the previous generation, or the skill sets in today's markets are more driven towards what their educations are?
Yeah, Rob, great question. And this highly educated does not have to do with practiced skill set. So what that education had to do with was bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhDs. We have many in this cohort that have gone way beyond to advanced degrees, some of them with PhDs that they're just now going into the workforce. So they don't necessarily have that matched skills and experience. As I think it was Lisa's group who commented on even that softer skills experience of working with people. So there's a desire to work with people, but not always the experience that comes after years of working together. You know, it knocks off the edges. Did that answer your question, Rob?
Yes, thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Anybody else? Any other questions or comments?
I had a question. In one of the slide before Maslow, you had mentioned that there can be some frustration if their thoughts and opinions, or, you know, if they're not acted upon. So can we spend a couple of minutes talking about that? Because I think that frustration and some of how that manifests is what might be hard for other generations, because, you know, the boomer generation, for example, you don't get frustrated with them. You just deal with it because they're the boss. So how can millennials learn how to work with the other generation, and how can the other generation understand that frustration of theirs a little more, because they may not have all the on-the-job experience. You know, they may be really smart and they may have some experience, but the boomer who's been doing it for years may have a way of doing it too, which is solid. So how do we work with that disconnect?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lisa. I'm going to share some information just from my own research and experience, but we also have a lot of millennials on here. Well, not a lot, but actually I'm looking around a good amount. So I'm going to ask you guys to jump in, please, and share if you have some other thoughts, you know, to add to this. But a couple of things, Lisa, from my research and understanding is a lot of it is just listening and if anything, bringing closure. So it's one thing if I come and I sit down with you and I share a bunch of ideas with you and you listen, and then I go away and nothing's ever done with that. And I don't even know, you know, I'm thinking because you didn't say anything or you really listened and it sounded interesting that you're actually going to do something with it, and then you don't. And so there's that huge sense of frustration. So if somebody, you know, let's say they move it along and they don't get approval, somebody stops it somewhere along the budget, then the importance of looping back to communication to say, here's, what we're doing. We're not going to be able to move forward. Thank you so much for your engagement and critical thinking. Because think about it, when somebody's bringing ideas to us, that means they care about the business. That means they're critically thinking, they're engaging from any generation, but it can feel frustrating when somebody's like, well, I've got 20 years on you, I've got 10 years on you, versus just listening with an open mind, because sometimes maybe it's even something we've tried before and didn't work before, but maybe it'll work now. But we do have to make decisions. And Patrick Lencioni, in his work around 5 dysfunctions of a team, he uses a phrasing that I think is really helpful to us in this, and that's what we call disagree and commit. So there may be times I bring an idea to you, Lisa, as my boss, and I share it with you. And as long as you come back, one, you show appreciation for that I shared it. You really genuinely ask, how do I see that working? And if we're not able to move forward with it, to let me know the why behind it. Simon Sinek talks about start with why, but also making sure that I can, even though I disagree with the decision, I'm still committed to the overall vision. And so that disagree and commit is really important, because guess what? For any of us, I don't care what generation we're in, there are going to be, we don't always get what we want, and we have to choose. Can I disagree and commit, or does this not work for me anymore? So I would love to hear, Lisa, I'd love to hear what you've done, what that meant to you, what I just said, and then maybe even from some of the other millennials in here, what your thoughts are around that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that when you have that feedback and when you have those ideas, that's people committed to the process and engaged, and that's a beautiful thing. So appreciating that is really important. And I think what you said about communication makes a lot of sense. Just let them know. And I actually had to say this last week. You know, we're listening to your ideas. We're not going to change everything, but the ideas are appreciated and they are being listened to. And, you know, we just can't implement everything that everyone wants to do all at once. It's just not possible. But letting them know we're listening and we'll consider it again in the future too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you know, Lisa, something that I think is so important is that we are listening and that we are making note of that, because later on we may say, hey, you know what, that idea you had, we turned left and we actually should have turned rightish. You know, you had a good idea there, you know, and being open to coming back and taking ownership of those things and of their ideas. And actually, we call it a lot of times the parking lot, you know, putting some things in the parking lot, and maybe even having a list that stays up in on your whiteboard of the parking lot of things that you occasionally revisit of ideas, I think is also helpful. So we are right at 3:30. I just cannot express thank you for your engagement. Thank you for all that you shared to enhance this conversation and your knowledge and participation you brought to the table, and just for being here. Again, let me share my screen. If there's, if any of you want to reach out to us to talk further with us, here's our contact information. We would definitely, obviously, this is something we're passionate about, so we'd be happy to talk with you. But again, thanks for being here, and I hope you have a terrific week.